One of the first things Jesus does when he says this is he says to love your God. To love your God. So he kind of personalizes it. A little bit different than the Shema, where it says love God. This says love your God. He's personalizing it. This isn't just any God. I had somebody talking to me not too long ago, and they were talking about the fact that they're really exploring all the different religions, and they want to get a sense of all of it because, you know, the more they know about all the different ways people think about God and all that, the easier it's going to be for them to know who God is. And my point to this young person was that, yes, it's not bad for you to get to know God and to hear people talk about God, but really the only way to do that is through a relationship with Him. Is to really be able to talk to God, and until you settle down on who this God is and begin to worship that God, you're not going to be able to do that. And it's so important for us to know that it's just not some abstract power, because this is where he was. It doesn't really matter, you know, I want to learn all this stuff because it's really just an abstract power that we can't really know. And it's not true. Jesus is talking about love your God. He's talking about a specific God, a specific person, if you will, as we talk about the three persons of the Trinity, become the Godhead, a specific God in that sense, person in that sense, something that is for real. The God of creation, the God that spoke into nothingness and created everything that we know. That's the God that we're to love with all of our heart, all of our soul, and all of our mind. The God of salvation, the God that saved Israel from Egypt, gave them the promised land, got them through the wilderness, the God that also sent us His Son and who died on the cross for us. This God of salvation, is the God that we are to love. Not just some higher power. The God who sent His Son to die for us is the God that we're called to love. And we're able to love because He did send His Son. Jesus is asking us to do what He gave His life to enable us to be able to do. That was a bad sentence. To enable us to be able to do. No English teachers out there. Good? Okay. And it's not a lukewarm love. It's not a lukewarm love. With all of our heart, all of our mind, all of our soul. Those categories talk about the totality of who we are. Some Greek thought separated, soul from mind, the spiritual from the physical, those kind of things. However you categorize it, we are listing all the categories that I can think of. Now, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I believe these three categories, heart, mind, and soul, would cross all the boundaries of any divisions within us of who we are. So we're to love this God with everything that we have, with our all. That's what Jesus is saying here. And so it's not lukewarm, but it's a passionate love given with everything that we've got. It kind of reminds you of his words in Revelation where he was chastising a church and said, because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. It's not about a lukewarm, fence-sitting kind of, when I get around to a thing, but it's with everything that I have. And he doesn't stop with just the commandment to love God. He doesn't stop with that. He continues with loving neighbor self. And he says that it's like it. And I think we need to look at what that means in the context of this question, which is the greatest commandment. He's not saying that we should love people the same way necessarily that we love God, for the same reasons and those kinds of things. What he's saying is that it's just as important. It's like it in that it carries the same kind of weight as loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, that neither one can be given up. And if we look at the book of one of the letters of John, he talks about how can you say that you love God and you don't love your neighbor. If you can't love the neighbor who you see, if you hate the neighbor who you see, or can't love the neighbor who you see, how can you love God? And so basically saying if you're not loving your neighbor, then you're not loving God. Then both of these things have to be hand in hand. Both of these things have to go together. There are some who find it easier to love God than the neighbor who plays loud music in the backyard when you're trying to rest and relax, or mow the lawn during one of your Saturday afternoon naps, or whatever it is you're doing. But there's also others who find it easier to love neighbor than to love God. Easier to do that good deed. Easier to send money to UNICEF or some other charity that's a worthy charity, but that's the way, you know, without spending time with God. And Jesus is calling us to both of these things. He's saying both of these are extremely important, loving God and loving neighbor. It's not an either or, but it's both all. And he says that when you do this, that fulfills the law. When we do both of them, we fulfill all the law of the prophets, meaning that we've obeyed all the commands. So even though Jesus has said, all right, I'm lifting up these two commands as the most important, the reason, the rationale behind that is because if you truly live those out, without some kind of mental gymnastics about, well, how can I do it without really doing it? Like in one of the other Gospels when they said, well, who's my neighbor? You know, who's my neighbor? Then we got the story of the Good Samaritan. But anyway, without doing any mental gymnastics, we're serious with ourselves, really living out what does it mean? What does it look like in my life to now be loving neighbor as I love myself? In other words, the golden rule, do to my neighbor what I would want done to me. Treat my neighbor as I would want to be treated. How does that look? What does my life look like when I'm loving God with all of my heart? Everything, not just a little bit of my heart, with all of my soul, not just some of my spirituality, but all of my soul, with all of my mind, wrapping my mind around what that means. When we do that, we will have obeyed all the prophets and all of the laws. Everything that has been written, that has these 613 commandments. That sounded awful high, didn't it? No, 613 commandments. When we've done that, we have, when we do these two, Jesus said, we've covered that. We've done it. So it's important for us to look at our own lives, I believe, and to see what that would look like. See, what would that actually look like if we were doing that? I was going to kind of make this interactive, but we spent a lot of time with the hymn singing in the beginning there. Singing all the verses of the songs that were picked out. So I just want to talk about it. I was going to ask for some feedback, but I really do want you to be thinking about that, about what you think it would look like to love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all of your soul. I think some of what it would look like is that I would spend more time with God. If I was serious about that, my relationship with God would be much better than it is. Because how indeed, and we've talked about this before, can you love somebody you don't have a relationship with? How can you love somebody you don't talk to? How can you love somebody that you don't spend time with? Read the love letters that have been sent to you. How do you do that? You can't. You don't. We have so much trouble with the divorces after people come back from military service, being gone for a year at a time or what have you. And some of that is the trauma and the tragedy that they've witnessed, and they're unable to adapt, and they've changed. But some of it is that separateness. They haven't been able to communicate. They haven't been able to keep up the relationship. Relationships are hard and take work. And if I was showing that I love God with all my heart,